Built two massive dams on the New River threatened to flood more than 40,000 acres across the North Carolina mountains.
But locals fought back and won. That battle not only saved their communities, it helped spark a national movement to protect rivers across America.
WBTV photojournalist Greg Simpson takes us to Ashe County, where the legacy of that fight still runs deep. It's tonight's cover story.
New River is a fantastic river and quintessentially Appalachian. So for 360 miles, including the North and South Fork, it is entirely in the Appalachian Range, which is really unique. It has its headwaters here in Ashe County, Watauga County near Boone. And because it's so Appalachian in its entire course, it has flora and fauna that are unlike any other river system. In the 70s, a two-dam impoundment system was proposed that would have dammed most of the headwaters in Ashe, Allegheny, Watauga, and Grayson County, Virginia. That proposal was largely so the power company could burn coal 24 hours a day, didn't have to shut their coal-fired plants off. Not a lot of value for the people of the headwaters, and so opposition was formed that would become the New River Conservancy to oppose that dam, and the strategy they chose was to turn it into a wild and scenic river, get it designated as a wild and scenic river. The Wild and Scenic Rivers program had just started, right? That law had just been passed, and the National Environmental Policy Act, one of the cornerstone environmental pieces of legislation in our country, had just been passed. So that fight not only really held the New River in the balance.
The question of what to do about the New River has become a classic controversy, a debate between environmentalists and a giant power company.
North Carolina has fought it every step of the way, and there's been protest against it because we feel like it's ridiculous.
So it really had far-reaching impacts not only to the people of Ashe County and Western North Carolina, but also to how we protect our rivers nationwide.
If the dam had been built, this entire area would be underwater. So we would have lost all of this beautiful valley, which is, some people like to say it's the gem of Ashe County. It's really a truly unique, beautiful valley here in the mountains, and all of this would have been underwater if the dam had been built. So right now we're in downtown Grassy Creek. And Grassy Creek is actually the first rural historic district on the National Register of Historic Places. If the dam had been built, we wouldn't be here. If the dam had been built, we would have lost this beauty and these historic buildings that were built in the 1860s, 1880s, and early 1900s. This place is incredibly special.
This river has a way of just sort of bleeding into your consciousness and really being a cornerstone of your cultural identity. The threat of losing that was too much for the folks to bear. So people, Republicans, Democrats, people from the cities like Charlotte and Winston-Salem and Raleigh, and people from really rural areas in North Carolina all came together to form the National Committee for the New River in October of 1975 and oppose the two-dam impoundment system by pursuing designation first at the state level and then a federal designation for the New as a wild and scenic river.
So I can only hope and pray that this nightmare for the people in the New River is over, and I think this is about it.
They got it stopped, and they got it stopped. Gerald Ford signed the legislation and quoted all the people of Ashe County in Western North Carolina when he said, I guess the people in North Carolina like the New River the way it is. And so today, not only do we have thriving communities up and down the New from Boone, West Jefferson, Lansing, but we also have a really fantastic river experience that really supports a thriving recreation economy. It really contributes so much to the cultural identity of Western North Carolina, and we would have lost that if the dam had been constructed, and I think we would have all been poor for it.